Hello, welcome everyone once again. Still in continuation of our training on strategic negotiation and leadership course. This training has been going on. We are on part four of this training. We have done part one, part two, part three. For those of us who have not I mean, watched or listened to the part one, two, and three, I will advise that you go back and follow the course step by step from part one, watch that of part two, and watch the part three, and before coming to watch the part four that we are doing now. It's very good for you to start from the beginning because that's the only way you can understand the concepts, the methodologies, and the ideas of this particular course very well. Because, like I said from the beginning of this training, this course is very rich. Yes, it is fully loaded, and you will not want to I bet you will not want to miss any aspect of it. We have been doing this from module one, two, three, and module four. Of course, we will be looking at module four today, where we are. In fact, we've actually started module four. No, I'm sorry, module six. We started module six, and we have actually spoken about some aspects of module six in part three. So I want to welcome you to part four of this very training on strategic negotiation and leadership. And of course, we will continue from where we stopped. And while we ended the part three of this course, it was on module six where we looked at cultural considerations in negotiation. We talked about negotiation being a negotiation in a globalized world. We said often involve parties from different cultural backgrounds, and of course, we know that understanding and adapting to cultural differences is crucial for successful negotiation. So this module six itself, like during the concluding part of part three, we talked about the importance of understanding cross-cultural differences, where we looked at cultural differences in the aspect of individualism and collectivism. We looked at other aspects of cultural dimension that has to do with power distance and uncertainty avoidance, even masculinity versus femininity. And we looked at short-term versus short-term orientation. And of course, we looked at communication styles, across different cultures. We look at the high context versus the low context, where we said in Japan and Arab countries, they prefer the high context communication style, while USA and Germany are more direct and they prefer the low context, style. We also looked at still under communication styles. We talked about formal versus informal. We discussed that in detail too. We looked at consensus versus majority rule, and we also looked at adapting negotiation styles to different cultures. Very important because that is the only way you can have a successful negotiation when you are when the other party is from a different culture. So you must adapt negotiation styles to different cultures. And the first one is we talked about, to do this successfully, you must research and prepare. There should be cultural research. You must conduct thorough research on the other party's cultural background, his business etiquette, and also the other party's negotiation norms. You must do that very extensively. Then we talked about building relationships. There's another way to adapt negotiation styles to different cultures is to build relationships. That is, trust and rapport. Because in many countries, building a personal relationship is a prerequisite for successful negotiation. So you must invest time in getting to know the other party and establishing trust. Then the third aspect under adapting negotiation styles is to look at the communication adjustments. The communication adjustment under which we look at language and interpretation. If there's a language barrier, so you should consider using interpreters. And you should also be clear and patient in your communication. Very, very key. It is another way of adapting. Adapting negotiation styles to different cultures. Then, of course, another aspect is the flexibility in approach. You must adapt your strategy. So that means adapting your strategy has to do with being flexible and willing to adjust your negotiation strategy to accommodate cultural differences. This may involve changing your pace, changing your decision making process, or even your negotiation tactics. Of course, then the aspect of flexibility in approach to you must consider patience and timing. You must understand that the pace of negotiation may vary between cultures. So some cultures may require more time to build trust and make. So now let us quickly look at a very short case study, very quickly, that reflects cross-cultural negotiations. Very short case study that reflects cross-cultural negotiations, because we know that analyzing case studies of cross-cultural negotiations can provide valuable insights, into effective strategies and common pitfalls. Now let's look at case study one. That is the case of a Japanese American business negotiation. In the context of this case study is that a Japanese company and an American company were negotiating a joint venture. Imagine a Japanese company and an American company negotiating a joint venture. So we know that there will be definitely cultural challenges. So the American side was direct and focused on quick results, while the Japanese side emphasized relationship building and consensus. And of course, the outcome was that the negotiations succeeded after the American team adapted their approach, spending more time on informal meetings and respecting the Japanese decision-making process. That is a perfect example. Another case study is that of the a German-Mexican trade agreement. The context of this particular case study is that a German manufacturer and a Mexican distributor were negotiating a trade agreement. So the cultural challenges they faced was the fact that the German team's emphasis was on detailed contracts and punctuality. It actually clashed with the Mexican team's flexible approach on emphasis on personal relationships. So, and of course, the outcome was that the negotiations succeeded after both parties acknowledged and adapted to each other's cultural norms. So the German team became more flexible with timelines, and of course, the Mexican team provided clearer documentation. These are all, examples of adapting your negotiation styles to different cultures, for successful negotiation. Now, let us quickly look at, to conclude module 6, let us look at strategies for global negotiations. Strategies for global negotiations, very important. Global negotiations actually require a strategic approach. This approach considers cultural differences and even leverages them for successful outcomes. Now, number one, cultural. You have to develop. Number one, you have to develop cultural intelligence. You have to develop cultural intelligence. Developing cultural intelligence is a strategy for global negotiation. What it involves is about cultural awareness. It has to do with continuously educating yourself about different cultures and their impact on negotiation. You have to be culturally sensitive also. That is still under cultural developing cultural intelligence. You must be culturally sensitive. You must show respect and be sensitive towards cultural differences, and you avoid stereotypes and be open-minded. That is number one. Under strategies for global negotiation. Then number two is to build a diverse team. Building a diverse team has to do with having some kind of cultural representation in your team. It must, you must include team members who understand the cultural backgrounds of the other parties. That is what it means to build a diverse team. And of course, you should also, build diverse perspectives. You must leverage the diverse perspectives within your team to develop comprehensive negotiation strategies. These are strategies for global negotiations. Then we look at, of course, the third aspect is to leverage technology. You should use virtual negotiations, use video conferencing tools to facilitate face-to-face interaction when physical meetings are not possible. And of course, you should also use translation tools. You utilize translation tools and services to overcome language barriers and to ensure clear communication. Then the number four is to create a culturally inclusive environment. Creating a culturally inclusive environment has to do with cultural norms. Creating an environment that respects and incorporates the cultural norms of all parties, and you must apply what we call inclusive practices. You must implement practices that promote inclusivity, such as flexible scheduling to accommodate different time zones and cultural holidays. These are strategies for global, negotiation. And the fifth one is to focus on mutual benefits. Focus on mutual benefits. Focusing on mutual benefits has to do with a collaborative approach. Emphasizing on the mutual benefits of the negotiation to create a win-win situation. This is very key. Then, of course, you look at shared goals. You should identify and align on shared goals and objectives, to foster collaboration and trust. Now, in this module 6, we have explored the importance of cultural considerations in negotiation, including understanding cross-cultural differences, adapting negotiation styles and strategies for global negotiations. So, by recognizing and respecting cultural differences, negotiators can build stronger relationships. You can even avoid misunderstandings and even achieve successful outcomes in cross-cultural negotiations. Now, we will quickly move to Module 6. Module 6 will talk about ethical considerations. That is, sorry, Module 7. Module 7 is it? Yes. Module 7, we're looking at ethical considerations in negotiation and leadership. Very important. Ethical principles are essential in negotiation and leadership because this guides decisions and behaviors that upholds fairness, integrity, and even accountability. So this module 7 will explore various ethical considerations, dilemmas, and also strategies for maintaining ethical standards in negotiation and leadership roles. Now, let us quickly look at ethical principles and dilemmas in negotiation. Now, ethical principles actually provide a framework for conducting negotiations with integrity and fairness. However, negotiators often face ethical dilemmas that require careful consideration and decision making. Now, what are these ethical principles? First of all, this is the principle of integrity. That's number one. The principle of transparency, the principle of respect for others, the principle of accountability, and the principle of ethical leadership. Now these are very very, very important. Under that of the first one, which is ethical principle of integrity, it has to do with honesty and truthfulness. Of course, it must involve always communicating truthfully and avoid misleading or deceptive tactics. Still under integrity, we talk about promises and commitments, honoring agreements and commitments made during negotiations is very important. And of course, still under integrity, we talk about the aspect of fairness. You must treat all parties involved in the negotiation process with fairness and impartiality. Now, under the ethical principle of transparency, that is category 2. Under transparency, we talk about open communication. You must share relevant information openly and honestly. You must avoid withholding critical details that could impact the negotiation outcomes. Still under that transparency, we must talk about disclosure of conflicts. So you must disclose any conflict of interest that could influence decision making or even compromise impartiality. So we are still talking about ethical principles here. Then the third category of ethical principle is respect for others. You must respect cultural differences and you must have respect for privacy. Very important. Under respect for cultural differences, it has to do with acknowledging and respecting cultural norms, values, and practices of the other parties. We just discussed that in module 6, where we talked about cultural considerations. Where we looked at cross-cultural negotiation, where you have to show respect and understanding for the other parties' culture and norms. Then we look at the fourth aspect is accountability, which has to do with taking responsibility, accepting accountability for your actions and decisions during the negotiation process. And of course, ethical leadership that has to do with holding yourself and others accountable to ethical standards and respect of principles of conduct. These are still, some of what we call ethical principles and in negotiation. Now, let us quickly look at ensuring fairness and integrity. What does it actually mean? Because maintaining fairness and integrity is crucial for building trust and credibility in negotiation. And let me tell you, without trust and credibility in any negotiation process, such negotiation will definitely fail. So leaders must uphold ethical standards to foster a positive negotiation environment. And how do you do that? You must avoiding unfair tactics. That is avoiding manipulative techniques or exploitative tactics or exploiting weaknesses. That is how to ensure fairness and integrity during negotiation processes. And it's still talking about ethical considerations and ethical principles. Then the second aspect is what balancing interest. You must seek a win-win solutions, and you must also mediate conflicts. You act as a mediator to resolve conflict fairly and impartially. impartially, because negotiation is actually, the difference between negotiation and mediation is the absence of a third party. Because in mediation there is the presence of a third party, but in negotiation there is the absence of a third party. So definitely mediation principles and is also useful for negotiators. So balancing interest, negotiators will also find themselves also trying to act as mediator to resolve conflict whenever, fairly and even impartially. Another aspect is ethical decision making. So ethical decision making is key. The use of ethical frameworks and consulting others, using ethical frameworks and guidelines to assess dilemmas and make informed decisions. These are also aspects of ensuring fairness and integrity. Then also the fourth aspect is upholding professional standards. There are industry codes of conduct that you have to be adhered to. You have to adhere to industry specific codes of conduct and professional standards relevant to negotiation practices. And the aspect of continuous learning is also key. You must stay informed about ethical best practices and standards, through continuous education and professional development. That means you, as a negotiator, you have to engage in continuous learning. And the hallmark of professionalism in negotiation is when you engage in continuous personal development, continuous education. These are aspects that we need to put into consideration. Then, what about the aspect of transparency and accountability in leadership? Transparency and accountability in leadership. Don't forget, this particular course is strategic negotiation and leadership training. Very important. So the leadership component is key. And we know that transparency and accountability are essential aspects of ethical leadership in negotiation. So leaders must demonstrate transparency in their actions and decisions, fostering trust and credibility. And how can they do that? You achieve transparency and accountability in leadership by one, open communication; two, ethical oversight; three, whistleblower protection; four, leadership by example. These are various techniques, ways of ensuring transparency and accountability in leadership. Under open communication, you must have clear information by providing clear and accurate information to all parties involved in the negotiation process. That is open communication. And you must set up feedback mechanism under that open communication as a category. You must set up feedback mechanism, because when you establish feedback mechanism to ensure stakeholders can raise concerns or provide input, that is about accountability. The second category is ethical oversight. You should monitor practices. You should implement monitoring practices to detect and address ethical lapses or misconduct. Very important. And of course, ethics committees. You should form ethics committees or advisory boards to review and guide ethical decision-making processes. These are aspects where leaders can ensure transparency and accountability in leadership. Then whistleblower protection. Whistleblower protection is about encouraging reporting. You encourage individuals to report unethical behavior or violations without fear of retaliation. And you should also do what we call investigation and resolution. You conduct prompt and thorough investigations into reported concerns, taking appropriate actions to resolve issues. Then leadership by example is the fourth one, which has to do with what? Integrity and role modeling. You have to demonstrate integrity and ethical behavior as a leader, serving as a role model for others. That is, the accountability must have to come with what? Holding yourself and others accountable for unethical standards and principles. Very important, ethical standards and principles, and of course, in negotiation and leadership rules. These are very important aspects. Now, we should also have some case studies we need to quickly look at under ethical challenges in negotiation, because we know that examining case studies of ethical challenges in negotiation provides valuable insights into real-world dilemmas and ethical decision-making strategies. Now, let us look at case study one. This case study one is a case of bribery and corruption in international business negotiations. The context is that a multinational corporation is negotiating a large contract in a foreign country known for corruption. Now, the ethical dilemma here is this: the local customs involved, the local customs involved, offering bribes to ensure business deals, but the practice contradicts the corporation's ethical standards and legal obligations. So, what was the decision? The corporation decides to adhere to its anti-corruption policies, opting for transparent and ethical negotiation practices despite potential disadvantages. That is very important. Case study two is a case of confidentiality breach in major negotiations. The context is during negotiations between two companies for a merger, confidential information is unintentionally shared with a competitor. The ethical dilemma here is this: the negotiation team faces a dilemma regarding whether to disclose the breach to the affected party, risking damage to the negotiation process. But of course, what happens, and the decision here was the team decided to prioritize transparency and integrity by promptly notifying the affected party and addressing the breach ethically. Now, in conclusion to Model 7, ethical considerations are fundamental to maintaining trust, integrity, and credibility in negotiation and leadership roles. By adhering to ethical principles, respecting fairness, transparency, and accountability, negotiations can build positive relationships. Like negotiators actually can build positive relationships. Negotiators can resolve conflicts constructively and even achieve mutually beneficial outcomes. So, ethical leadership serves as a cornerstone for fostering a culture of trust and ethical behavior in negotiation practices. Now, quickly, we move on to Module 8. Module 8 is looking at advanced negotiation techniques. Module 8 actually focuses on advanced negotiation techniques that empower negotiators to navigate complex scenarios, manage power dynamics effectively, leverage technology, and handle multi-party and high-stakes negotiations with confidence. Yes, that's why it is called advanced negotiation techniques. And under this module 8, one thing we must get to understand is a situation where negotiation is taking place. When you have power asymmetries. So negotiation power dynamics is very important because understanding and managing power dynamics is crucial in negotiation settings where parties may have where parties have varying levels or influence and leverage. Yes, when you have power asymmetry, when parties have one party's power is higher than the other party during negotiation. So that's what we call negotiation power dynamics. Now, we have types of. Let us even look at types of power. Types of power. First of all, we have expert power, we have referent power, we have legitimate power, we have reward power, and we have coercive power. These are the five types of power that may come into play during any negotiation process. Now, when we say expert power is based on knowledge, skills, or expertise relevant to the negotiation. Yes, expert power. It is actually when a particular party possesses knowledge, skills, and expertise that is relevant to the negotiation even better than the other party. Then the second one is referent power. Referent power has to do with the kind of influence that is derived from likability, derived from respect and even admiration. That is another power of its own. Then legitimate power is the type that is derived from a formal position or authority within an organization. So these are various types of power. Then, of course, reward power. Reward power has to do with ability to provide rewards or incentives. We see this kind of power in happening during negotiations, And of course, the last one is coercive power, which has to do with ability to apply punishments or negative consequences. These are various types of power asymmetries. Now, let us look at strategies for managing power. One of the best strategies for managing power is building coalitions. Building coalitions. When you form alliances or coalitions to increase your negotiation power. The second strategy is what? Information advantage. You can gain access to valuable information that can influence negotiation outcomes. And another strategy is the aspect of enhancing expertise. You know, enhancing expertise. And when you say enhancing expertise, you can continuously develop and demonstrate expertise that is relevant to the negotiation topic. These are various ways of managing power or balancing the power dynamics. Now, looking at balancing power here, balancing power, which has to do with what? Techniques to level the playing field and ensure fairness despite power differentials. That is what we mean by balancing power. And how do we even leverage technology? Leveraging technology in negotiations. Technology can enhance communication, information management, and even decision-making processes in negotiations. So we have some communication tools, that we need to look at. When we want to use technology in negotiations. These communication tools involve one, video conferencing, two, instant messaging, three, virtual whiteboards. These are, communication tools that can be used, that can be leveraged upon in negotiations. Under video conferencing, of course, we know that video conferencing facilitates face-to-face interactions with physical meetings, where physical meetings are not possible. Instant messaging enables real-time communications and even quick decision making. Then virtual whiteboards, collaborate. These are collaborative tools for brainstorming and even documenting ideas during a negotiation. Now, the second aspect for leveraging technology in negotiation is what? After video conferencing, communication tools, we talk about data analytics, utilizing data analytics to support decision making and predict outcomes. That is another aspect. Third one is simulation tools. Virtual simulations can practice negotiation scenarios and refine strategies. Then the fourth one is the use of online platforms. Platforms for documenting, sharing, negotiation tracking, and even virtual negotiation outcomes. These are ways of leveraging technology in negotiation. Let us quickly look at managing multi-party negotiations. We also know that multi-party negotiations involve coordinating interests and managing complexities, among multiple stakeholders. We have primary stakeholders, we have secondary stakeholders. So in managing multi-party negotiations, we must use certain strategies. One is coalition building, two is facilitation skills, three is conflict resolution, four, decision making processes. These four aspects are ways of managing multi-party negotiations. Looking at coalition building, you can form alliances or groups to achieve common goals and increase bargaining power. That is another way of managing multi-party negotiations. The second aspect is facilitation skills. There are techniques to manage diverse perspectives and even foster collaboration. Then the third aspect is the conflict resolution aspect. You should adopt strategies to address conflict and maintain momentum, towards agreement. Then decision-making processes. You should establish clear decision-making criteria and protocols to manage consensus building. These are ways of managing multi-party negotiations. Then, of course, how do we look at what do we? Let us talk about negotiation in high stakes and crisis situations. Negotiating under pressure requires resilience, adaptability, and strategic thinking. Because it involves crisis management. Crisis management has to do with those techniques to stay composed and focused during crisis or emergencies. Then, of course, there's also rapid decision making, which involves strategies for making quick yet informed decisions under time constraints. These are various aspects that are key. Then contingency planning. Contingency planning has to do with anticipating and preparing for worst case scenarios to mitigate risk. Yes, yes, that's contingency planning. It is very key. And of course, building trust. Building trust is important. Maintaining trust and credibility amid uncertainty and even high stakes. These are uh, aspects that we need to understand. And of course, in conclusion to Module 8, we must realize that Module 8 has equipped participants or has equipped us with advanced negotiation techniques essential for navigating complex negotiations, and even managing power dynamics, leveraging technology, handling multi-party scenarios, and even thriving in high stakes and crisis situations. So by mastering these techniques, negotiators can even enhance their effectiveness, achieve favorable outcomes, and even maintain professional integrity in challenging negotiation environments. Very important. So now, these are some of the things we need to quickly move to Module 9. Module 9 will be looking at leadership development. Leadership development for negotiators. Because Module 9 will be focusing on personal leadership development for negotiators, emphasizing continuous growth, coaching, mentoring, and building professional relationships to enhance negotiation skills and effectiveness. Now, yes, so the first thing we need to look at is personal leadership development plans. Every negotiator should have personal leadership development plans because personal leadership development, involves setting goals, identifying strengths and weaknesses, and implementing strategies for continuous improvement in negotiation skills. Yes, we must put that into consideration. The